Hello and welcome to today's painting demonstration. My name is Leah and I'm going to teach you some acrylic painting today, as I do every week on this channel. We are doing Mount Shasta with a little bit of light snow, and I'm going to explain my process along the way. All the materials for this painting demonstration are listed on my website, and the links for that are down below. Today, a little bit different. I'm always trying to improve. I got the palette back. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't get the 3-camera setup going, but you have to have 3 different brands, otherwise OBS gets confused about what to display where, and wrestling with that every time is kind of agonizing. So we're just going with 2. My hope is to do more art blogging, video art blogging this year, so that will be the FaceTime. And this will be the paint time with the live streaming. So we have all our colors here. The cadmium yellow light, cadmium red medium, quinacridone magenta, burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, cerulean blue, and titanium white is what we use every time on the stream, and we're using acrylic paint. And I'm going to start the same way I always do with my large filbert brush. And the burnt sienna. I have quite a bit of water in my brush right now, and I'm going to start by painting in very loosely the dark values of the painting. You'll notice I have a couple extra paint brushes on the scene. I am testing out my new Craftimo purchase. These are in collaboration with Sarah Byrne's studio. She's a gouache painter from Scotland. And so they have a nice bounce to them. I think they'll work very nicely for acrylic paint, so I will let you know. And if I intend on using them regularly, I will list those on my website as well. Now I have the pencil sketch here, and if you're interested in getting a little bit closer to the reference photo or the thumbnail, or the drawing that I start out with, you can go ahead and check the community feed and you will see it there. If you need to search this at a later time, then you can just go ahead and search by the date or the name of the painting. That will work as well. I'm hoping that this will be a good long-term way to organize all of this informative material. So basically what I do is I find something that's inspiring. It might only be inspiring for one small reason. I like a lighting, or I like the composition from the very beginning. Then what I'll do is I'll try to retain that aspect of initial inspiration, and I will create a thumbnail. Sometimes more than one thumbnail. And I'll keep on manipulating that tiny 2-inch by 2-inch image until I come up with something that I think is going to be a successful painting. Now, more recently, I've been doing those in light watercolor. And that helps give you guys a better idea of what we're trying to accomplish also. And it's nice to look at. And then I'll put a light pencil sketch on our paper, and then go from there. But after I have the thumbnail pretty well developed like this, I'm going to reference that when I'm doing this painting part, and then only look back to the initial inspiration if I feel lost with the color blending. After you have a tool like this, you're mostly going off this. Let's see, now I'm going to start with the corners of the sky. I like to vignette them a bit. Helps keep your eye inside the scene. And also, skies have a gradient. And they'll be lighter wherever the sun is. Our sun in this composition is going to be on the left side. The reason that I start with the darker values first is because if you overlap them later, you'll just make them a little bit darker relatively. It's going to darken up a few more things. I like to keep this part real loose. You don't have to spend too much time doing this. Okay, now that that's done with, I'm going to put that large filbert brush aside. I'm going to pick up the small filbert. And I'm going to start with the sky. Now I think I'm going to be good and not mix with my paintbrush now that I'm thinking about it. This is the part where I mix my colors that I think I'm going to use for this painting, at least generally. So I have this little silicone mixer here. I'm going to take half cerulean blue and half titanium white. I'm just going to keep that pile right in between the two colors, and then a lighter version on the white side, and if I need it to be darker, I'll just pick up some blue. Now I think I'm going to mix a little bit of pink. And it's going to be a warm pink, so I'm going to use the cadmium red and the titanium white here. I like my pinks in the sky to shift into a melon color. So just a touch of cad yellow light on this one side. All right, now I'm going to make our darkest value with this, which is half ultramarine blue and half burnt sienna. And that mixes together pretty easily. If I want it to be a cool dark, I can go towards the blue, and if I want it to be warmer, I can just go towards the burnt sienna. Sometimes I will add magenta to this mix to get more of a purple tone in there. It's pretty subtle. I'm going to add some titanium white to the top here because I think I'm going to be pulling some grays on that mountain. Though the grays on that mountain, I'm looking at the photograph, they're kind of mauve. And that mauve is also in the clouds. So I think right now is to pick an actual color for that. Here's some magenta. Here's some cerulean blue. That is starting to get there. I'm going to pull a little bit more white in. And then I'm seeing that we need to warm it up a bit more. And I'm going to use cadmium red for that. Okay, that color is looking about right. So now we're starting to have a nice range of colors here. I'm checking the reference photo and I'm making sure that we don't have anything obvious that we're missing out. I don't know if there's a lot of green right next to the water. I don't think I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to maybe put snow there. As if it had snowed a couple days ago and then the snow on the trees maybe burned off. I think it'd be nicer though if we just put shadowy snow there. I'm deciding. Yeah, that's what we'll do. So we're gonna do less green. Because I don't know if I like that green. I think it's too many colors. I think it'd be nicer if we stayed in this family here. And we can just make those trees a little bit muted. They can be more towards the shadowy color at the base of the mountain. You see that color? That's like gonna be ultramarine. Too much. And burnt sienna, right? Except we're gonna go a little bit warmer. Add a little bit of yellow to that. That is a dark forest green. It's not quite as earthy as I was hoping. That's it. We're using all the burnt sienna that I have on here. Okay, now we got a little bit of green. All right, putting that palette knife aside, I'm going to grab myself more of the burnt sienna because I know we're going to need it later. Make sure to have all these colors accessible at all times. You never know when you're going to need to shift something in that direction. I'm using the Liquitex transparent burnt sienna, by the way. You can use regular burnt sienna and just use a little bit of more water if you're painting on paper. That's totally fine. Okay, remember the little filbert that we put aside earlier? We're going to start in the sky. Grabbing some cerulean blue. I'm going to start in that corner. Just going to loosely paint around where the clouds are going to be. As I'm moving away from that corner, that upper right corner, I'm just going to progressively pick up more white. Try to go quickly so you can kind of blend back into what you just put down. This is part of why I like putting a lot of clouds in. You can really make the blending of the sky a lot easier on yourself. Also, I'm just a big fan of clouds, so even if it didn't make it easier. Now see, the sky gradient in the reference photo is completely different than what we're doing. And actually, as I'm studying it right now while painting, it looks kind of unnatural because it goes way darker on the side of the mountain where the sun is clearly coming from that side. Like the snow is lit on that side and everything. So there is something wacky going on with that photo. That's okay. Photos can kind of get away with some stuff like that. So your brain just is like, yep, that's real. But in a painting, some of that stuff, you're gonna have to change a little bit to be more convincing. Okay, that's a nice gradient for the sky. I think we should probably just jump in and do some clouds. I'm gonna rinse out the brush pretty good. Then I am going, oh, I didn't mix this. Titanium white with just a touch of, a tiny touch. Now, depending on the brand of cadmium yellow light you're using, you'll need different amounts of yellow, because if you're using a high quality paint, a professional grade paint, there's going to be a lot more pigment in that. So just make this light yellow color really soft. Now I'm going to put it in the areas of the clouds that are closest to where the sun would be. Now I'm going to not be afraid of overlapping and underlapping the cloud zones that we've marked out for ourselves. Hopefully you did that in really light pencil so that it's not going to show. If it does show, you could just put more paint on there. You can do a couple layers until it's gone. Now, if you go a little overboard, like I just did, and the clouds are a little bit bigger than you wanted them to be, we can paint some negative shapes into them later. No big deal. It's going to be after they dry completely, though. After about the peak summit of this mountain, I'm going to pick up a little bit of that melon color with the light yellow brush. I didn't take any of the paint out of that, just left it in there. It's going to be well incorporated into the next cloud level. Pick up a little bit more of that color, that peach, as I am going away from the sun. adding a little bit more light cloud to this little inlet of the mountain, and I don't know if that's the right call or not. There's some light clouds on the right side of the mountain in the reference photo, and they kind of look nice. I'm thinking that they're lit on the other side of the mountain, which would make sense. We'll try it out. Okay, I'm going to give the brush a good rinse out, and I'm going to pick up a little bit of the mountain mauve, but I'm going to carry it over to the pink, the cloud pink. I'm going to softly lay that down on the shadow side of some of the taller, loftier clouds. I'll try to rotate my brush to get some different shapes. Okay, rinsing out the purple. I'm going to go back to that peach color. Just try to make sure these cloud shapes look good. Light yellow, but just on the tops of these really billowy parts. Because they could be catching sun for sure. Okay, now remember how I mentioned that these wispy bits were just like too big for me? Wasn't digging it. I'm just going to take a small point and that light blue. This is a number 6, but the tip of it comes really, really sharp. And just with the direction of what I believe the way the wind would be moving, that's going to be the way that I'm putting these strokes down. One is still a little too boxy for me. Oh geez. And then the blue got too dark. There, fixed. Okay, those are a little bit more ethereal. Now I'm going to add a little bit of negative shapes into the rest of the cloud. So I'm going to just go ahead and keep on using this point brush. I felt like I wanted to lighten up the sky towards the top of that mountain. Some of these color transitions can be a little bit softer. There we go. Now I'm grabbing a little bit darker color. And I'm just dry brushing over some of these edges. Give them a little bit of a lighter, puffier feel. Okay. Better. I'm going to put that one aside. I'm going to pick up my 1/4 inch flat. And I'm going to start with the dark values on this mountain. Now the rocks that are facing towards the sun are going to be more of the warmer mauve color, and then the ones facing away are going to be more this the cooler tone. If you see me do something that's not that, it's not on purpose. Now, it's funny, like with landmark mountains, I feel more compelled to be more accurate. Whereas if it's just some random mountain, I don't feel so compelled. Sometimes I get a little bit carried away. I'm going to try not to do that. I'd like to stay a little bit more on the expressive side. Oh man, but not that expressive. Little. That was a little expressive. Whoops. Picked up more pink, pulled it over to the mauve, lightening up as I go down the side and behind the tree. Probably try to keep that tree pretty loose with its foliage to show some of the cool mountain detail behind it. The light is really hitting the peak, which I enjoy in this reference. And this edge here, and that's where the light doesn't quite wrap around any further than here. I'm adding more pink. No one can stop me before I go back to the mauve. Now, I'm kind of paying attention, or trying to pay attention to the dimension of the mountain. You want your brush strokes to move in the direction that if you were rain, or if rain, you know, if you're not rain, that's okay. If you were coming down this mountain, like, and gravity was your only guide, then that's the direction the brush stroke would go in. See, okay, now we're getting cooler in color. During this part, I'm paying more attention to the reference. And since the paint is already mixed for this part of our little project, I don't feel tempted to make it more like the reference photo. So we've already decided we're shifting this mountain more towards this purple mauve. For our, you know, color composition. Okay, this goes this way. And the right side is just going to be darker all the way around. Okay, there's a little bit of light shining here in the middle. So I'm going back to the pink. Okay, and I'm going to try to mimic that shape. it is going in that other direction. So I am changing my brush stroke direction. Then the shadows come back again. There's going to be some trees covering up that area, so I don't need to be too particular. Rinsing out my brush, picking up that pink mauve color again. I'm going to add a little bit more texture to this area right here. Okay, it's time for snow. I'm going to continue to use the 1/4 inch flat and that light yellow color from earlier. I can just branch mix right off that. And I'm going to pick up the smallest amount of pink. Just want a nice warm white for the sun side of the mountain. And this, the top here, the peak, is going to be our primary focal point, so I just want to be a little bit more detail oriented in that spot. But it's nice at this step, you can just drag over a lot of the rock. You can underlap a little bit, you can overlap a little bit. No big deal. Just make sure to stay on the sun side with the warm white. I'm just going to vaguely dry brush some of that behind where our tree is going to go. I'm doubling up some spots where I need it to be a little bit more opaque. Okay, that's looking good. Now we want, there's one more spot where there's a little bit of warm white, and it's going to be here. And that little, it's like a distant mountain, turns a little bit more towards the sun. Okay, now the lightest blue that I made earlier, I am going to grab just a touch of that cool mauve. I'm going to use that to mute the blue a bit. Now I'm going to add white, more titanium white to one side of it. We're going to start with that lighter color. Now, if you feel like that was too dramatic of a shift, you can always, after this is dry, warm it up a little bit more, or at least put neutral titanium white on there. I can show you that after we get done with this cool color. Remember, even with laying down the snow, you want to keep those brush strokes in the direction of gravity. Keeping a lot of this very dry with the brush. A lot of little sketchy strokes. Okay, now I'm going to go darker. A darker snow shadow blue. Which I might need to make more of. Coming down the mountain. Just getting a little bit darker as we are getting all the way around that right side. Rinsing that brush out because I know that this little patch of snow, it gets a little bit more turned towards the sun. So the very lightest shadow color, I'm going to edge that up to where it is warmer. Okay, very good. I'm liking that. You definitely can see the difference. When you have a warm white next to a cool white, you can definitely appreciate the difference. It gives the mountain shape, all that gradating, changing color. Definitely noticeable. All right, so now the far background trees, which are mostly in shadow. So I'm going to branch mix off of the mauve here. I'm going to add a little bit of ultramarine blue and a little bit of that, I'm going to call it funky forest green. All right, there we are. Now I'm going to come up the mountain a bit over the dark mauve in just some stylistic, really vague shapes. Still using the flat. I'm just going to inch this color up the mountain a bit. This is so distant, it's so far away. You really wouldn't be able to see any detail except for just a subtle transitioning color. Also, we're moving far away from our focal point in this painting, so no big deal. Picked up just a little bit more mauve that time, just to give it some transition. And I'm going to come down to about here. This is kind of a hard line right there. I'm not a huge fan. I am grabbing the mauve, and I'm just gonna sketch it into that green. There we go, that's much better. Looks more natural. There we go. Great. Now the tops of the trees in the reference photo are catching a little bit of light on the left-hand side, and it does help pop them out from that distant background. So we'll try it out. I'm bringing more of the funky forest green down into our mauve mixing area. And then I'll grab some of that peach. Is that light enough to have good checkering? Not quite. More peach. Get this nice muted, I don't know what you would call this. This is like, I've seen this green color on the side of cheese. We need to be dark enough to stand apart from what we just painted, but it is not a focal point, so it doesn't need to be super high contrast. All right, so I am still working with my 1/4 inch flat. I am using these Bob Ross style brush strokes with the distant trees. Using the side of the brush, using a ziggy-zaggy saw type movement. I am just gonna sketch these trees right on here. Now I'm gonna try to make them not evenly distributed. I'm gonna go back and forth. Some of them will be a little bit larger, some a little bit smaller, some a little bit closer together. It's subtle, but our eyes are so extremely good at picking up on patterns. If you see something that's too samey, you'll see it. Everyone will see it. I'm not gonna lie to you. Uneven intervals, unless it's on purpose, you know. That's fair. But I mean, it will be the first thing somebody sees. Okay, so since our paint is nice and light and a little bit transparent, we're picking up a lot of glowy underpainting on that tree line, and I like it. I'm going to smear some of this here behind these bigger trees. We just need that back there. And then there's a foreground bush here. Lovely. I'm digging those colors. Okay, so I want to add snow right in the bottom here before the water, but it might come up onto the water. I'm thinking We're going to need to do that after we do the reflection because it's going to lay on top. Even though it's tempting to do it now. Okay, that foreground's going to have snow. We got a shrub here. I'm going to make that a little bit more blue. I think it's smart to do the mid-ground trees at this point. This one doesn't need to pull your attention. That one's going to be quite mucho darker. So the green that's next to our darkest value, I'm just going to pick up more of that darkest color. I'm going to start with this tree here. I'm going to have my 1/4 inch flat on its sharp side. I'm going to go right up where the trunk would be and sketch in that line first, and then use the sharpest tip of this paintbrush and make really light marks for my branches. So I don't want this to be a really heavy form. I want to keep it light. Since we're working mostly back to front, don't have to worry too much about overlapping. Overlap away. That front bush is going to overlap as well. Just make sure that that trunk is not visible unless you want it to be. So you may need to add another layer of paint, some heavier brush strokes right on top there. So you don't want that straight line to pull your eye. This is on the edge of the painting and far away from the focal point. Doesn't need attention, it's more for framing and symmetry. You can go ahead and go right off the side. Lovely. I'm experimenting with this idea that that front bush is going to be way more blue leaning. I'm fully okay with this being the wrong answer. I'm just going to try it out for us. Okay. I don't want it to be super high contrast. It just needs to be different enough. Now, a little bit lighter blue as we come down the shrubbery. Trying to mix up my shapes. Okay. And then there's going to be cool snow, really dark cool snow in front of that. Sure. For now, it works. Moving on. Rinse out that brush. We're going to go to these trees. They're more important than this tree. These are lead lines to the focal point. So we're going to warm them up on the sun side. Let's get our cad yellow. And we have this peach plus green mixture over here. There's a lot of grays. I'm warming up that highlight color with the pink. And I'm going to start on the sun side, and then I'm going to add the shadows on top of it because the shadowed foliage would be more towards us, the viewer, so that's why you would start with the highlights first. So we're going to cover most of them up. Nice and loose. And then at about here, I'm going to stop with that highlight color. I'm going to go to our next tree, do the same thing. This is not a precision process, just get it on there in approximately the right area. Now the dark green. Ever so slightly lighter than the tree on the right side. Sharpen that brush up. Got a medium amount of water on our brush. We're going to start at the tippy top with some really, really fine, dainty brush strokes. And I'm going to be a little bit daintier on the sun side than on the shadow side. Try not to cover up all of your highlight, but you can definitely cover up at least half of it. You're going to want to go to about where the mid-ground foliage starts as far as this medium green is concerned, because what we're going to do is we're going to make it darker after that. Tree number 2. and then tree number 3. Keeping these a little bit abstract and loose. Okay, now I'm going to darken that. Pull some of that darkest dark into the funky forest green. These are all my technical paint names. And you can drag them up a little bit on the shadow side, but they're mostly for going down further to where you marked your bank to be. Lake, I guess it's this lake or pond or something like that. I don't know exactly where this is. Could be just a seasonal thing. I don't know, I see this and I just think like spring mosquitoes. Like really hungry ones too. Feeling like I want to integrate a little bit of this dark medium green onto the sun side of this guy. Not a lot, just a bit. Okay, great. Now we're down on that bank. I'm going to rinse out my brush because I would like this to be more of a cool shadow tone. Okay, so the dark cerulean blue from the sky earlier. Let's see, I'm going to pull some mauve into it if you have any mauve left. If not, you can use your darkest dark with a little bit of quinacridone magenta on there. Whatever gets it, we want it to be a little bit more neutral. Let's try that out. I'm going to start in the darkest area or foreground. Suppose this area could be a little bit lighter. It's going to pick up some reflected light from the environment. Okay, back over to the left side and layer up. Okay, now as we go into the distance, I'm just going to brighten up that color a bit. Adding a little bit of water to my brush for some bristle control. Small area there, way in the yonder. And I'm going to brush that up onto the trees a bit. I'm going to be pretty vague with that. Try to keep those brush strokes loose and dry brush them up. Now on this side, I feel like there would be more reflected light, so I'm going to pull, this earlier was our warm white, from about the middle over. To the left, I'm brightening up that snow. Okay, now I can put some of that color into the reflection. Reflection in the water is typically a little bit darker and a little bit more saturated, but do your best. What you can do, if it ends up being the exact same color, is you can take some light transparent white and just give yourself some movement lines for the water. That'll make it more obvious to the viewer that is what is happening. And you see people do that a lot. Okay, in the reflection, I'm adding more green. Starting to run out of my colors, but that's okay. The painting is coming towards the end. We're almost there in the home stretch. Put down some paint that's just a little bit too transparent. That's okay, you can go back. After it's dry though, it's not dry, it's gonna pick up. And we can put a little bit of that mauve in this remaining reflection spot. I ran out, so I'm mixing more. So I took the ultramarine blue, quinacridone magenta, and then a little bit of cad red to pull that warmer. It's very, very dark, so I'm going to add some titanium white. I think we're about there. I am shooting for like slightly darker than the mountain. Okay, I'm okay with the colors of this little blue shrubbery guy. But I'm going to bring some of the branches over a little bit of that dark, dark snow. I'm gonna make sure there's not a lot of paint on my brush so that I can kind of dry brush it over, adding some air and some subtlety. There we go. Okay, now for those little water lines. So get your flat brush, nice and clean. Then, it's okay if this white is cool, on the cool side. It's gonna have a pretty good amount of water in it. Make sure there's not a lot in there, sharpen that brush up really well in the palette, and then maybe start with the foreground where the line is a lot bigger. And just gently put a broken line in. Now there's a lot of water in here, so it is going to get lighter. Lighter? No, that's not the right word. It's going to get darker, but it will be more transparent when it dries. I do like the look of it when it is not a continuous line. It's a little bit more broken. It doesn't pull as much attention that way. That is a little bit more obvious as water now. Give this snow over here a little bit more texture. I think I'm wanting the bottom of the left side trees to be just a little bit darker. So I'm just going to integrate into the bottom there, our darkest value. And I am also going to brush it over the snow just a bit on the bottom. Try to keep it loose, it doesn't need to call attention. Okay, I'm kind of taking a step back and noticing everything that's happening. And see if we need anything. I would like to see a little bit more light back here. We're running out of mixing space. So I took what was left of the pink mixing space and I added a little bit of yellow. And with the edge of my paintbrush, I'm just gonna, well, I'm gonna add more water on there too so it's a little bit more transparent, and I'm just gonna sketch some little trees in here. They don't all need to be catching light, just a bit of them. Mostly the tops. Okay, good, good, good. I'm going to wipe that off completely onto my paper towel, and then I'm going to blend the bottom. I like that a lot better. Very good. Okay, this is going to be a really awesome peel because I feel like the water is going to be better after we peel it, and you know that's still not totally dry. So you want to wait until these little water lines are completely dry before you decide if you want to make them a little bit brighter or not. And it's better to be safe than sorry, but this is going to help this line have a little bit more interval if it is more transparent in some places. You just want it to be broken and also not look like Morse code at the same time. And if you have a line going off into, hopefully not the exact corner, soften it up a bit. Make it a little bigger too. Okay, great. I think that's looking really good. Thank you so much for hanging out and hopefully painting with me. I hope you're having a delightful winter season, and look forward to more outside painting blogs, maybe some how-tos after I'm more comfortable with plein air painting. We'll see how it goes. And then some more detailed setup videos that are not live streams as well for this year. All that to look forward to. Thank you so much for hanging out, and until next Wednesday next year, happy painting.